The rain hammered down on the canyon like bullets from the sky. Minho pulled his hat lower and squinted through the darkness. Lightning split the night, showing him glimpses of the rocky walls around him. He was supposed to be heading home after checking the fence lines, but something had caught his eye down in the ravine. There was a horse down there, a big black mare, and she was in trouble. Minho tied his own horse to a sturdy pine tree and grabbed his rope. The storm was getting worse by the minute, but he couldn't just leave an animal to suffer. That wasn't who he was. His grandfather had taught him better than that. The mare looked up at him as he approached the edge. Even in the dim light, her eyes seemed to glow. Must be the lightning playing tricks, he thought. But there was something about the way she watched him that made his skin crawl. Horses were smart, sure, but this one looked at him like she understood every word he was thinking. Her coat was the strangest thing he'd ever seen. Black as midnight, but with a shimmer that reminded him of oil on water. When the lightning flashed, colors danced across her fur like the northern lights his father used to tell stories about. The mare was trapped under what looked like pieces of metal, twisted, blackened chunks that definitely didn't belong in this canyon. Minho had lived in these hills his whole life, and he'd never seen anything like it. The metal was warm to the touch, even in the cold rain. "Easy, girl," he called down to her. "I'm coming to help you." She didn't panic like most horses would. Instead, she stayed perfectly still, those bright eyes never leaving his face. It was almost like she was waiting for him. Minho secured his rope around a boulder and started his descent. The rocks were slippery and the wind kept trying to slam him against the canyon wall. His boots struggled to find purchase on the wet stone. But he'd grown up climbing these cliffs, and he wasn't about to let a little storm stop him now. Halfway down, another flash of lightning lit up the scene below. For just a second, Minho could have sworn he saw something else entirely. Not a horse, but something that made his heart skip a beat. Then darkness swallowed everything again, and all he could see was the mare's eyes reflecting the distant lightning. When he finally reached the bottom, the mare nickered softly. It was a gentle sound, almost like she was thanking him. Minho had worked with horses his entire life, but he'd never heard one make a sound quite like that. The metal debris was heavier than it looked. Each piece felt like it weighed a ton, but somehow Minho managed to shift them one by one. The mare helped by staying completely still, not fighting or thrashing like an injured animal normally would. As he worked, he kept talking to her. "You're going to be okay. I've got you. Just stay calm." The words seemed to comfort her, or maybe they were comforting him. Either way, he kept talking. The last piece of metal was the biggest. As Minho lifted it away, his fingers brushed against the Mare's neck. Her skin was warm, almost hot, and for a moment he felt something like electricity run through his hand. Free at last, the mare struggled to her feet. She was magnificent, easily 17 hands high, with legs like a racehorse and the proud bearing of an Arabian. But there was something else about her, something that made Minho's breath catch in his throat. She stepped closer and gently touched his shoulder with her muzzle. In that moment, Minho felt like she was trying to tell him something important. Something that would change his life forever. The mare limped into Minho's barn just as the first rays of sunlight broke through the storm clouds. He'd managed to get her up the canyon trail, though it had taken most of the night. She was hurt, but not as badly as he'd first thought. A few cuts on her legs and a nasty scrape along her side, but nothing that good care couldn't fix. Minho had been running this small ranch alone since his father passed 2 years ago. It wasn't much, just a few cattle, some chickens, and enough land to make ends meet. But it was quiet, and that's how he liked it. At least it used to be quiet. The mare settled into the largest stall, like she owned the place. Most injured animals would be nervous, pacing and snorting. Not this one. She stood perfectly still while Minho cleaned her wounds, those strange bright eyes following his every movement. It was like having a conversation without words. "You're not from around here." "Are you, girl?" he said, applying antiseptic to a cut on her front leg. She didn't flinch, just watched him work with that unsettling intelligence. That's when the weird stuff started happening. First, it was his old radio in the barn. The thing hadn't worked properly in years, mostly just static and the occasional weather report from town. But now it was picking up signals he'd never heard before. Strange sounds that almost sounded like voices, but in no language he recognized. The static would clear up whenever the mare was nearby, like she was some kind of antenna. Minho tried adjusting the dial, but the mysterious signals kept coming through. They had a rhythm to them, almost musical. Sometimes he caught himself listening, for hours, though he couldn't understand a single word. The second strange thing happened 3 days later. Minho went to check on his vegetable garden behind the house and nearly fell over. The tomato plants had doubled in size overnight. The corn stalks that had been knee-high yesterday were now taller than his head. Everything was growing at an impossible rate, green and healthy like he'd never seen before. He knelt down and touched the soil. It felt different somehow, warmer and more alive. When he looked back at the barn, he could see the mare watching him through the window of her stall, just watching like she was waiting for him to figure something out. The neighbors started asking questions. Old Doyun from the next ranch over stopped by with a bottle of soju and curiosity in his eyes. "Your place looks different, Minho," he said, gesturing at the thriving crops. "What's your secret?" Minho just shrugged and poured them both a drink. Good soil, I guess. But he knew it wasn't the soil, it was her, the mare. Everything had changed since she'd arrived. She ate very little, which was strange for such a large horse. Most of the time she just stood in her stall, looking out at the mountains with those glowing eyes. When Minho brought her hay, she'd nicker softly and touch his shoulder with her nose. The same gentle gesture she'd made in the canyon. At night, he'd sometimes catch glimpses of light coming from the barn. Not electric light, but something softer, like moonlight reflected off water. When he'd go to investigate, everything would be normal. Just the mare standing quietly in her stall, watching him with what looked almost like amusement. The strangest part was how she made him feel. Calmer. Somehow like all the loneliness and worry he'd carried since his father's death had lifted from his shoulders. When he talked to her, and he found himself talking to her more and more, it felt like she understood every word. Not just understood, but cared. "What are you?" he whispered one evening, brushing her shimmering coat. She turned her head and looked at him with those impossible eyes, and for just a moment, Minho could have sworn she smiled. 3 weeks after rescuing the mare, another storm rolled across the mountains. This one was different, angrier somehow, with lightning that seemed to dance in patterns across the sky. Minho had never seen anything like it. The air itself felt charged, making the hair on his arms stand up. He was in the kitchen, making coffee, when the light started flickering. Not the usual power surge from lightning, but a steady pulse like a heartbeat. The radio in the barn began crackling louder than ever, those strange musical voices growing clearer by the minute. Something was happening. Minho grabbed his jacket and ran toward the barn. The closer he got, the brighter the light became. It wasn't coming from his electric bulbs. This was something else entirely, something that made his skin tingle and his heart race. He threw open the barn door and froze. The mare was glowing, not reflecting light like her shimmering coat usually did, but actually producing it. Waves of soft blue radiance pulsed from her body in rhythm with the lightning outside. She stood in the center of her stall, head raised, as if she was listening to something only she could hear. "What's happening to you?" Minho whispered. The mare turned toward him, and for the first time since he'd rescued her, she looked afraid. Not of him, but of something else. Something bigger. Thunder crashed overhead, so loud it shook the barn walls. At that exact moment, the mare's form began to blur. Like looking at her through water, her outline shifted and wavered. Minho rubbed his eyes, thinking the strange light was playing tricks on him. But it wasn't a trick. Where the black mare had stood moments before, a young woman now knelt in the hay. She was the most beautiful person Minho had ever seen, with long dark hair that seemed to hold starlight and skin that glowed with the same soft radiance as the mare had. She wore clothes unlike anything he'd seen, fabric that shifted color, like her coat had, silvery and flowing. She looked up at him with those same bright eyes he'd come to know so well, the same eyes that had watched him with such intelligence, such understanding. "Please don't be afraid," she said, and her voice was like music. the same musical quality he'd been hearing on the radio for weeks. Minho's legs gave out. He sat down hard on a hay bale, staring at her in complete shock. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. You're not a horse." She shook her head slowly. "My name is Nari. I'm from a place very far from here, farther than you can imagine." "How far?" he managed to ask. She pointed up at the storm-filled sky. "Beyond the stars. Beyond what your people call the galaxy." Nari struggled to her feet, moving carefully like she was still getting used to her human form. "I crashed here 3 weeks ago. My ship was damaged and I was hurt. I took the form of one of your animals to hide." "Hide from what?" Her expression darkened. "From people who want to take me back to a life I don't want. To force me into a marriage. That would destroy everything I care about." Minho's head was spinning. Aliens, spaceships, forced marriages. It sounded like something from the science fiction movies his younger brother used to love. But here she was, standing in his barn. Real as anything. "The man they want me to marry is called Wubin," she continued. "He's cruel and powerful, and if he gets control of my family's territory, millions of people will suffer. That's why I ran." She took a step toward him, and Minho noticed she was trembling. "I've been hiding for months, jumping from planet to planet. When my ship crashed in your canyon, I thought it was over. But then you came." "Me? You saved me without knowing what I was. You took care of me, spoke to me kindly, treated me with respect. I've traveled across the galaxy, and I've never met anyone with a heart like yours." Another crash of thunder shook the barn. Nari looked up at the ceiling with worry in her eyes. "They're coming," she whispered. "The storm isn't natural. It's their ships entering your atmosphere. They've found me." Minho stood up, his mind finally catching up to the situation. "Then we need to get you out of here." She stared at him in surprise. "You believe me?" He looked into those familiar eyes, the same ones that had watched him with such trust for 3 weeks. "Yeah, I believe you." Nari sat on the hay bale across from Minho, her hands folded in her lap like she was trying to figure out where to start. The glow around her had faded, but her eyes still held that otherworldly light he'd grown used to seeing in the Mare. "My father rules 7 planets," she began quietly. "The Andorian system has been in our family for over 1,000 years. We're not warriors like some of the other royal houses. We're traders, peacekeepers. Our worlds sit right in the middle of the major shipping lanes between 3 different galaxies." Minho tried to wrap his head around what she was saying. 7 planets, 3 galaxies. It was like trying to imagine numbers too big to count. "That's why Kyung wants to marry me," Nari continued, her voice getting harder. "He doesn't care about me at all. He just wants control of our trade routes. With those shipping lanes, he could move his armies anywhere in known space. He could start wars that would kill billions of people." "What's he like?" Minho asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Nari's face darkened. "Cruel. He conquered his first planet when he was 16 by poisoning the water supply of the capital city. Children, elderly people, innocent families, none of that mattered to him. He's done worse things since then." She stood up and walked to the barn window, looking out at the storm. "My father is old and tired. The Royal Council convinced him that marrying me to Kyung would bring peace. They think they can control him, but they're wrong. The moment we're married, he'll find a way to eliminate my father and take over everything." "So you ran away?" "I tried to fight it first," she said, turning back to him. "I argued with the council, pleaded with my father, but the wedding date was set. 3 months from now, I was supposed to stand in front of millions of people and promise to love a monster." Minho watched her pace back and forth. Even in human form, she moved with that same grace he'd admired in the Mare. "That's when you decided to escape." "I stole one of our fastest ships and ran. My people, we can change our shape. It's a gift we've had for thousands of years. I thought if I could get far enough away, find a planet where no one would look for me, I could hide until I figured out another plan. But something went wrong." Nari nodded sadly. "Kyung's hunters found me faster than I expected. They damaged my ship during a chase near your solar system. I barely made it to Earth before everything shut down." She sat back down, looking exhausted. "The crash hurt me badly. Not just my body, but my abilities too. Normally I can shift between forms easily, like changing clothes, but now—" She gestured at herself helplessly. "It takes everything I have just to hold this shape, and I can't control it properly anymore." "Is that why you were stuck as a horse for so long?" "The horse form felt safer," she admitted. "Simpler. When I'm human, I think too much about everything. I've lost everyone I've left behind. As a mare, I could just exist. Be calm. Watch you take care of me and pretend for a little while that I was just a normal animal with a normal life." Minho felt a pang in his chest. "You seemed happy." "I was," she said softly. "Happier than I'd been in years. You treated me with such kindness, Minho. You talked to me, brushed my coat, made sure I was comfortable. You didn't want anything from me except to know that I was okay." The storm outside was getting worse. Lightning flashed more frequently. Now, and the strange musical sounds from the radio were getting louder. "They're getting closer," Nari whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "How long do we have?" She closed her eyes and seemed to be listening to something. "Maybe an hour. Their ships are fast, but they'll need time to scan the area and figure out exactly where I am." Minho stood up, decision made. "Then we better get moving." "You don't understand," Nari said, shaking her head. "These aren't just soldiers. They're the best hunters in the galaxy. They have weapons that can level cities, technology beyond anything your people have ever seen." "Maybe," Minho said, grabbing supplies from around the barn. "But they don't know these mountains like I do." The musical sounds from the radio suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any noise Minho had ever heard. Even the storm seemed to pause, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Nari grabbed his arm. "They're here." Through the barn window, Minho saw lights descending from the clouds. Not airplane lights or helicopter beams, these were different. They moved too smoothly, too quietly, like drops of liquid fire falling from the sky. 3 of them, spreading out in a triangle pattern over his ranch. "We need to go. Now," Nari whispered urgently. Minho threw his camping gear into a backpack, water bottles, energy bars, a first aid kit, and his father's old hunting knife. Not much against alien technology, but it was what he had. "My truck's behind the house." "No. Vehicles," Nari said, shaking her head. "They'll track anything with an engine. We go on foot." They slipped out the back of the barn and started running toward the tree line. Minho had hiked these woods since he was a kid, but never at night. Never with his heart pounding like this. Behind them, the alien ships settled over his property like giant metal vultures. They were halfway to the trees when the first energy beam hit. The barn exploded in a flash of blue-white light. Not fire, something cleaner, but far more destructive. Where his barn had stood for 30 years, there was now just empty air and a patch of glass where the sand had melted. "Don't look back," Nari said, pulling him forward. "Keep running." Another beam lanced down, vaporizing his house, then his truck, then the chicken coop where his father had taught him to collect eggs. Everything Minho had ever known was disappearing, behind them in flashes of alien light. They reached the forest just as the ships began moving in their direction. Nari stumbled and Minho caught her arm. "I'm okay," she gasped. "Just changing forms takes everything I have right now." "Can you do it, the horse thing?" She shook her head. "Too dangerous. If I shift now, I might not be able to change back for hours. We need to stay human so we can think, plan." They pushed deeper into the woods, following game trails Minho knew by heart. The alien ships moved. Overhead, sweeping the forest with beams of light that cut through the darkness like searchlights. But these weren't just lights. When they touched the trees, leaves withered and branches cracked. "Scanning beams," Nari explained quietly. "They're looking for my energy signature. Can they find us?" "Eventually. But I'm getting stronger. Watch." She held out her hand, and the air around them began to shimmer. It was like looking through heat waves rising from summer pavement. The effect spread outward, covering both of them in a bubble of distorted air. "Optical camouflage," she said. "It won't fool their senses completely, but it'll make us harder to spot." They kept moving, staying off the main trails. Minho led them through creek beds and rocky areas where their footprints wouldn't show. His grandfather had been a hunter, and he'd taught Minho how to move through the wilderness without leaving traces. Those lessons were keeping them alive now. The ships followed, but slowly. They had to stop frequently to scan, and the thick forest canopy made their job harder. Minho realized they were searching methodically, like a grid pattern. Professional, but not familiar with the terrain. They're not from around here either, he said. Nari managed a weak smile. Kyung's hunters are used to cities and space stations. They've probably never tracked someone through a forest before. They reached the edge of his property just as dawn was breaking. Ahead lay 20 miles of desert before the next town. No cover, no trees to hide them. Just open sand and scrub brush under a sky full of alien ships. This is going to be the hard part, Minho said. Nari took his hand, and he felt that familiar tingle of energy. We'll make it. We have to. Behind them, the ships were converging on the forest, having lost their trail in the darkness. But it wouldn't take them long to figure out where their prey had gone. The hunt was just beginning. The old copper mine had been abandoned for 50 years, but Minho remembered his grandfather talking about it, hidden in a canyon wall, with tunnels. That went deep into the mountain. It was the perfect place to disappear. They'd been running for 2 days straight, sleeping in caves and drinking water from mountain streams. The alien ships kept searching, but they were moving in wider circles now, obviously frustrated. Nari's camouflage trick was working better than either of them had hoped. This will do, Minho said, squeezing through the narrow entrance to the mine. They'll never find us in here. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber where miners had once worked. Old equipment sat covered in dust, pickaxes, ore carts, and coils of cable. Nari sank down against the rock wall, exhausted. I need to rest, she said. The camouflage is draining me. Minho set up their small camp while she recovered. As he worked, he found himself studying her more carefully. She looked human enough, but there were small differences. Her ears were slightly pointed, her fingers a bit longer than they should be, and her eyes, even tired and scared, they held depths that seemed to go on forever. You were a soldier, she said suddenly. Minho looked up from arranging their supplies. How did you know? The way you move, how you think about escape routes and defensive positions. I've seen warriors before, you have their training. He nodded. Army. Did 2 tours overseas before I came back to run the ranch. Seems like a lifetime. Forgo. That's good, Nari said, sitting up straighter. We're going to need those skills. Over the next few hours, she told him more about their pursuers. Kyung had sent his best hunter team. 5 soldiers with advanced weapons and sensors. They were good at tracking, but they were used to hunting scared refugees who just ran and hid. They don't expect their targets to fight back, Nari explained. Most people who run from Kyung keep running until they're caught. But we're not going to keep running, she smiled, and for the first time since her transformation, she looked dangerous. No, we're not. Nari's strength was coming back faster, now that she had time to rest. She showed Minho how her people's technology worked, not magic, but science so advanced it might as well be. Her camouflage field, for instance, bent light around them by manipulating electromagnetic fields. Your people understand these concepts, she said, sketching diagrams in the dirt. You just haven't developed the tools yet, but the principles are the same. Minho found himself picking up the ideas quickly. His army training had included basic electronics and communications. This was like that, but taken to an incredible extreme. Can you teach me to use any of this? He asked. Nari pulled a small device from her clothing. It looked like a smooth stone, but it glowed with soft blue light. This is a personal shield generator. It should work for you too. She pressed it into his hand, and immediately he felt energy flowing through his fingers. The device was warm, almost alive. Think about protection, Nari instructed. Imagine a wall of force around your body. Minho concentrated, and suddenly the air around him shimmered like heat waves. He reached out to touch a rock, and his hand stopped an inch away from the surface, blocked by invisible force. Incredible, he breathed. Your people have strong minds, Nari said admiringly. It usually takes weeks to learn that technique. They spent the next day planning. Minho used his military knowledge to analyze the hunters' search patterns, while Nari explained their weapons and tactics. Together, they found weaknesses. They're overconfident, Minho observed. They're not watching their backs because they don't think we're a threat. And they're unfamiliar with this terrain, Nari added. They keep flying over the same areas, missing the smaller hiding spots. By the second evening, they had a plan. Not to keep running, not to keep hiding, but to take the fight to their pursuers. It was dangerous, probably crazy, but it was their best chance. You don't have to do this, Nari said quietly. This isn't your fight. Minho checked his father's hunting knife and adjusted the alien shield device on his belt. They destroyed my home. They're hunting someone I care about. That makes it my fight. She looked at him with those deep starlight eyes. Why are you helping me? Really? Minho thought about it for a moment. Because it's the right thing to do, and because... He paused, surprised by his own honesty. Because I think I'm falling in love with you. In the flickering light of their small fire, Nari smiled. Then let's go show these hunters what humans are capable of. The hunters made their first mistake at dawn on the third day. Instead of staying together, they split up to cover more ground. Minho watched through his grandfather's old binoculars as two of the alien soldiers landed their small scout craft in the valley below the mine. Amateurs, he muttered. Never split your force when hunting dangerous prey. Nari crouched beside him, her recovered abilities letting her sense the aliens' energy signatures. They think we're just scared refugees. They have no idea what's coming. Minho had spent the night rigging traps using mining equipment and alien technology. Old blasting wire connected to Nari's energy cells. Rockfall triggers positioned above narrow passages. It wasn't pretty, but it would work. The two hunters moved through the canyon like they owned it, their silver armor gleaming in the morning. Son, they carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy, but they held them casually, not expecting real resistance. Now, Minho whispered. Nari sent a pulse of energy through the wire. The charges detonated perfectly, bringing down a wall of rock that blocked the canyon exit. The hunters spun around, suddenly trapped, their casual confidence evaporating. That's when Minho made his move. He dropped from a ledge 20 feet above them, his alien shield absorbing the impact. The first hunter turned, just in time to see Minho's knife slash across his weapon, severing power cables Nari had identified as weak points. The energy rifle died with the electronic whine. The second hunter was faster, bringing his weapon up and firing. The energy blast should have killed Minho instantly, but his shield held. The force knocked him backward, but he rolled and came up running. Impossible, the alien hissed in accented English. Humans don't have shield technology. We're full of surprises, Minho replied, tackling the hunter around the waist. They went down hard, rolling in the sand. The alien was stronger, but Minho had wrestled in high school and learned dirty fighting in the army. He used every trick he knew, going for pressure points and weak spots. The first hunter had drawn a backup weapon, some kind of energy blade that cut through rock like butter. He advanced on Nari, who was using her powers to deflect his attacks. With barriers of force. Stay back, princess, the hunter sneered. Lord Kyung wants you alive, but he didn't say you had to be unharmed. That's when Minho saw red. He broke free from the second hunter and threw himself between Nari and the energy blade. The weapon sliced across his shoulder, burning through his shirt and into his flesh. The pain was incredible, but he didn't stop. You want her, he growled, grabbing the hunter's wrist. You go through me first. Minho's shield was failing, sparking and crackling from the overload, but his determination was absolute. He twisted the hunter's arm until the alien dropped the blade, then drove his knee into the creature's stomach. The alien doubled over, gasping, You're just a primitive human. This changes nothing. Maybe, Minho said, picking up the fallen energy blade, but this primitive human is about to kick your advanced alien butt. The second hunter tried to help his partner, but Nari was ready. For him. Her powers had fully returned now, fueled by seeing Minho get hurt protecting her. She lifted the alien off his feet with pure force and slammed him into the canyon wall. The fight was over in minutes. Both hunters lay unconscious in the sand, their advanced weapons scattered and useless. We did it, Nari breathed, rushing to check Minho's wound. Yeah, he said, wincing as she examined the burn on his shoulder. We actually did it. But their celebration was short-lived. The hunter's ship was transmitting automatically, sending their location back to the main fleet. Red lights blinked on the alien console, and warning sounds filled the air. "How long do we have?" Minho asked. Nari studied the readouts, her face grim. 20 minutes, maybe less. They grabbed what supplies they could carry and started running again. Behind them, the unconscious hunters would soon wake up and report what had happened. The news would spread quickly through Kyung's forces. A human had fought alongside the princess. A primitive, backward human had defeated trained soldiers with nothing but courage and determination. For the first time in this hunt, Kyung's people were scared, but that also made them desperate. And desperate enemies were the most dangerous kind. As they climbed out of the canyon, Minho could already see new ships descending from the clouds. Bigger ones this time. The real hunters were coming now. "No more playing around," Nari said quietly. Minho adjusted his pack and checked his remaining gear. "Good. I was getting tired of running anyway." The battle was won, but the war was just beginning. The sky turned black at noon. Minho had never seen anything like it. Massive ships blotted out the sun, each one the size of a city. They hung in the air like storm clouds made of metal and death, casting shadows across the entire desert. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in minutes. "He came himself," Nari whispered, staring up at the fleet in horror. "Kyung is here." They had taken shelter in an old gas station, abandoned years ago when the highway was rerouted. Minho peered through cracked windows at the alien armada above them. There had to be 50 ships up there, maybe more. "How many soldiers does he have?" Minho asked. "Thousands," Nari replied, her voice hollow. "Each of those ships carries a full battalion." He brought an invasion force. A new sound filled the air, not the humming of engines, but something like a massive speaker crackling to life. When the voice came, it spoke in perfect English, cold and commanding. "People of Earth," the voice boomed across the landscape. "I am Warlord Kyung of the Nexus Empire. I have come for one person, the fugitive known as Princess Nari. She is hiding somewhere on your world." Minho felt his blood turn to ice. This wasn't just about Nari anymore. "You have 1 hour to produce her," Kyung continued. "If she does not surrender herself, I will demonstrate what happens to worlds that harbor enemies of the Empire. Your largest city will serve as an example." Images appeared in the sky, holographic projections showing major cities around the world. New York, London, Tokyo, Seoul, all of them with targeting reticules hovering overhead. "She is bluffing," Minho said, but even as he spoke the words, he knew it wasn't true. Nari shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, he's not. Kyung destroyed an entire moon colony once because they refused to pay his taxes. 20 million people died in 30 seconds, the broadcast continued. "Princess, I know you can hear this. Your compassion has always been your weakness. Will you let millions of innocent beings die for your selfish desire for freedom?" Minho watched Nari crumble. Before his eyes, she slumped against the wall, looking smaller and more fragile than when he'd first found her injured in the canyon. "I have to surrender," she said quietly. "I can't let him hurt your people because of me." "No." The word came out harder than Minho intended. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." She stood up, squaring her shoulders like a queen preparing for execution. "This was always going to end this way. I was foolish to think I could escape." Wait. An idea was forming in Minho's mind. Crazy, probably impossible, but it was something. What if he got what he wanted, but not the way he expected? "What do you mean?" Minho took her hands in his. "You said he wants to marry you to get control of your family's territory, right? It's not about love or even about you personally. It's about power." "Yes, but what if someone else married you first?" Nari stared at him. "Minho, that's not how royal marriage works. There are laws, ceremonies, treaties that have to be. But if you were already married, legally married according to your people's customs, then Kyung couldn't force you into another marriage, could he?" She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Theoretically, no, but who would... Oh. Her eyes widened as she understood what he was suggesting. "Me," Minho said simply. "I'll marry you. Right here, right now." "You don't understand what you're offering," Nari said, her voice shaking. "Marriage to a member of the royal family means taking on all our enemies, all our responsibilities. You'd have to leave Earth, come with me to face the Royal Council, maybe spend the rest of your life fighting wars on planets you've never heard of. Minho thought about his burned ranch, his quiet life that was already gone forever. Then he looked at this brave, beautiful woman who had trusted him with her life. I understand, he said. I'm choosing this, I'm choosing you. But why? You barely know me. I know enough. He cupped her face in his hands. I know you're kind to wounded animals. I know you're brave enough to run away from an empire to protect innocent people. I know you've got the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen, and I know that every day I've spent with you has been better than all the years before combined. Tears were flowing freely down her cheeks now. The ceremony is simple, she whispered. We just have to pledge ourselves to each other under the open sky witnessed by the stars. They stepped outside the gas station. Above them, Kyung's fleet waited like vultures, but beyond the ships, Minho could see actual stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I, Nari of the House of Andor, pledge my heart and my life to you. Minho of Earth, she said, her voice carrying clearly in the desert silence. I, Minho Park, pledge my heart and my life to you, Nari, he replied. Light erupted around them, not from the alien ships, but from Nari herself. It was the same gentle radiance he'd seen that first night in the barn, but brighter now, more joyful. It's done, she said, wonder in her voice. We're married. Above them, alarms began blaring from Kyung's fleet. They had detected the energy, signature of a royal bonding ceremony. The warlord's voice came again, but this time it was full of rage. Impossible! The princess cannot marry a primitive human. Minho smiled up at the ships and spoke loudly enough for their senses to pick. It's too late, buddy, she just did. The light around Nari and Minho grew brighter, spreading outward like ripples on a pond. What had started as a gentle glow became something magnificent, streams of golden energy that reached up toward the stars themselves. What's happening? Minho asked, watching the light dance around them. Nari's eyes were wide with amazement. The starlight bonding. I thought it was just a legend. Above them, chaos was breaking out in Kyung's fleet. Ships were moving frantically, and the warlord's voice crackled over the speakers again, but this time he sounded panicked. This changes nothing, Kyung shouted. The human is not worthy. The bonding is invalid. But even as he spoke, new ships were appearing in the sky. These were different, sleeker, more elegant, with hulls that seemed to be made of captured starlight. The Andorian royal fleet had arrived. My father, Nari breathed. He came. The largest of the new ships settled gracefully to the ground nearby. A ramp lowered and figures in flowing robes emerged. The man leading them looked like an older version of Nari, with the same luminous eyes and dignified bearing. Father, Nari called out, running toward him. King Jinwoo embraced his daughter, relief clear on his face. We felt the bonding from 3 star systems away. The entire royal court is in uproar. He turned to look at Minho with curiosity rather than anger. You must be the human who has caused such a commotion. Minho felt incredibly underdressed, standing before an alien king in his torn jeans and burned shirt. Your Majesty, I'm Minho Park, the first human to bond with royal blood. In our people's history, the king said thoughtfully, do you understand what you've done? I married your daughter because I love her and wanted to protect her, Minho replied honestly. King Jinwoo smiled. A perfect answer. The starlight bonding only occurs when 2 souls are perfectly matched. When their love is pure and their sacrifice willing, it cannot be faked or forced. More aliens were emerging from the ships now. Minho could see they wore official-looking uniforms and carried what looked like recording devices. The Galactic Council, Nari explained quietly. They monitor all royal bondings. A tall alien with silver skin stepped forward and spoke in a voice like music. By the ancient laws, witnessed by starlight and bound by willing sacrifice, this union is recognized across all member worlds. Prince Minho of Earth and Princess Nari of Andor are legally wed. Prince? Minho repeated, stunned. Marriage to royal. Blood makes you royal blood, King Jinwoo explained. Congratulations, my son, you now outrank half the nobles in the galaxy. Above them, Kyung's ships were retreating. but his voice still boomed across the desert. "This is not over. I will not be denied what was promised to me." The council representative raised a device that projected Kyung's image into the air. "Warlord, Kyung, you are hereby charged with illegal pursuit of a bonded royal, threatening a protected world and violation of marriage laws. You are ordered to withdraw immediately." "I reject your authority," Kyung snarled. "Then you reject the authority of all civilized worlds," the council member replied calmly. "You are now classified as a rogue state. All member worlds are authorized to defend themselves against you." Minho watched in amazement as hundreds of new ships appeared in the sky, the combined fleets of dozens of different worlds, all united against Kyung's aggression. The warlord's massive armada suddenly looked very small. "This isn't possible," Kyung's voice came through, smaller now, uncertain. "It's very possible," King Jinwoo said, stepping forward. "You see, the starlight bonding doesn't just unite two people. It proves that love and sacrifice can triumph over greed and violence. Every world in the galaxy has received the same message, that there are still those willing to fight for what's right." Kyung's fleet began jumping to hyperspace, fleeing, rather than face the combined might of the Galactic Alliance. "He'll be back," Nari said quietly. "Eventually," her father agreed. "But now he's a fugitive, not a legitimate ruler. The galaxy knows what he truly is." The council representative turned to Minho. "Prince Minho, your people have proven themselves worthy of galactic recognition. Earth will be offered membership in the Galactic Council, with you as its first ambassador." Minho looked around at the alien ships, the impossible technology, the beings from across the stars who had come to witness his marriage. A week ago, his biggest worry had been fixing fence posts. "Do I get a say in this?" he asked. Nari took his hand, smiling. "You always have a choice. We could stay here on Earth if you want. Live quietly. Let the galaxy handle its own problems." Minho thought about his burned ranch, his simple life that was gone forever. Then he thought about the vastness of space, the adventure waiting among the stars, and the incredible woman beside him who had changed everything. "Someone's got to make sure humans don't embarrass themselves out there," he said with a grin. "Might as well be me." As the sun set over the desert, the combined fleets prepared to depart for the stars. Minho Park, former ranch hand, current prince and future ambassador, took his first steps toward a destiny he could never have imagined. The galaxy would never be the same.